This Rose Wagner Theater holds a very special place in my heart. When I walked in here, I looked up on the stage and I thought, I remember back in 2004, and some of you may have been here that evening, but two very special candidates running for governor, one was my husband and one was Scott Matheson, who we love, sat on this stage and had the most civil debate that I've ever heard. They decided at the beginning of their campaigns that neither one of them would say a negative word, and they did it. It was something that I think is an example for the rest of the country. I don't know that we can ever achieve that again, but they did it. And at the end of the campaign, when my husband ultimately won for governor, Scott Matheson and his wonderful wife came over to our hotel and said, "We want to thank you for a great campaign," shook our hands, gave us a hug. And it was a few years later that we had the Canyon Mine disaster, as many of you remember. And John looked at me and he said, "I need somebody to oversee this, the best attorney I can find. And I don't know of anyone better than Scott Matheson." So he turned back to Scott and said, "I need your help." That is what we need today. That represents exactly what we're celebrating this evening.
My question is really, how can we, as Americans, come together? Where can we do it? Who can support us doing it? Are there institutions that we look at who do things that could be doing other things that bring us together? And how do we each actually find people who really differ from each other and often muster up the courage to reach out to them in a personal way? And I'm wrestling with that question both at a micro level of how do I do it in my own life, at a community level, how do we do it as communities, and then at a state and national level, because I think what we know is that without relationship and without bonds of affection, we will not be able to move forward as the great country that we are.
My big question, and the reason I came, is because I have seen it through the work I've done, starting with Move On, that citizens are kind, they're caring, they're intelligent, and when you actually have a connection, you can do wonderful things. And yet somehow we've been losing that capacity, and we've become increasingly homogenized in our communities, where we are not getting that opportunity to speak with each other from the heart. And it's become impolite to talk politics. And we know that if people only talk to people with like-minded views, that their viewpoints just become more extreme. So we have to find a way to talk to each other with open hearts. And there are practices to do that. And the living room conversation is one very simple, self-facilitated form, but there's others.
So I think I have a question and then a confession. And my question is this: I think that now is the time for us to really ask ourselves deeply and be really brutally honest. Do we really believe in this big idea of American democracy? Because if we do, I think that we have to turn a corner. My confession is that probably about 10 years ago when we started this work, if I look back on what I was thinking, I have to be honest that there was a side of me that thought a little bit the same way that way too many of us right now are thinking, is that if only the other people would just get out of the way, we'd be good. And we'd know how to run this thing, and I think that's just sort of at the very base level of so much that we do right now. But that really isn't the idea behind this great American adventure. It is, from the beginning, the idea is that it is the straining forces of different ideas that allow us to do democracy, that allow us to self-govern without a king. And if we want to be able to do it, we've got to start seeing each other as being partners in the uneasy, difficult challenge of making good decisions.
My question is how do we, from the individual, family, neighborhood, community level on up through the system, translate what I think is genuine good faith efforts of bringing people together to make decisions respectfully and civilly to the ultimate decisions. So many times in my career, in fact, I would say more often than not, a community or a region has come together over how to approach a matter, only to fail when the final decisions get made that incorporate it into law. And to me, that we see it in such an extreme way with the hyperpartisanship of this last year. And maybe it will kickstart us into how we can elect the leadership or provide the impetus that the public demands of leadership to achieve the ends that we've been talking about all day.
My question for you is the question that I actually have in this process, which is what does that mean? What does it mean to love America? Because the thing that's been challenging to me in my work is I get deeper and deeper with almost anybody, and I find out that they love America. That's why they're doing what they're doing. And it actually came from love, not always pure love. I don't know about you, but I find pure love pretty challenging, whether in my marriage, with my kids, or with my friends. But the best love we can do, I find that we don't really know how to translate our love for the country in a way that comes out as love. And it ends up looking like the 2016 election. So how do we get from love to the 2016 election? And I guess that's my question. What's stopping us from getting down to that point where we actually are feeling?
The Universal Declaration of Rights enshrines a value that is not one of our values, which is dignity. And as I was reflecting on the election and really putting myself in the shoes of the winners, what I realized is how many Americans felt acknowledged for the first time in a long time, felt their winning actually allowed them to be treated with dignity. And I think that's what each of us wants. And we're certainly seeing that among those who are disadvantaged, are for racial issues or gender issues or nationalistic issues. All of us wanted to be treated with dignity. And how do we bring perhaps something new into our democracy 2.0? It may be another value.
We're looking for leaders all around the country that want to change the dynamic so that we start calling to the best part of our capacity and our relationships. And it's fun, you know. This is so serious right now, which it is, but it's this wonderful exploration, and my world is so much richer.
I believe it is going to start from us as individuals, from us in our interactions, from us working in our communities. You know, it's interesting, when I'd get together with my fellow mayors and local elected officials, we were always dumbfounded by what was happening at the federal level and increasingly at the state level. Because when we got together, we would talk about things we were working on in our communities, what was working, what wasn't working, and share ideas. Or as one of my favorite mayors, Rasim Reed from Atlanta, said to me one time when we were on a panel together, he goes, "God, you know what's so great about when I meet with mayors and you, Ralph, and these other mayors?" He said, "I can sit down with you, I can come up with a great idea, and I can bring it home, and the first time I attribute it to you, and then after that, it's mine." And you know, that sort of competitiveness is healthy, right? But it's not adversarial, and it's not based on some mythological ideology sometimes. And so at the local level, I really feel like sort of from the community level up, we have the best opportunity to reshape things.
We need to change the avenues through which we communicate. We need to go back to old-fashioned relationships in our communities. Communities are the ballast of American democracy, and we've kind of let the sort of the strife in Washington flipped that on its head. And so in some ways, nothing's changed before the election and after. We just know now that we have to be strong communities. And magic things happen between humans when they know each other, when they get out from behind their computer screens and know each other as human beings. And I would say that probably all of us have walked that walk very personally. And things happen, and you just go, okay, wow, I get it now, and you start to understand things from new perspectives that you didn't have before, that you cannot possibly have if you just seek out your own information silos. So in some ways, I like to say that really it's not really that hard what we have to do. It's changing our habits of thought. Like I mentioned before, we need to really believe that the other is our partner and makes us stronger and wiser and helps us reason, as difficult as it is sometimes, and changing our habits of association. And we have to be very intentional about it. It's not going to magically happen. We have to decide that it's got to happen.
We know we can't keep moving back and forth between left being in charge and right being in charge, and then one undoing the other and the other undoing what the other undid. It doesn't work. And so my passion about us moving forward is actually a new constituency, a transpartisan constituencies of citizens across the divides, not a third party. We're transpartisan Democrats, transpartisan Republicans, transpartisan independents, or even transpartisan non-voters who really want to work together to see ourselves and our leaders solve problems.
Yeah, I'm discovering the power of listening. Yeah, people want an answer, and you were talking about families staying connected, but I'll go into a room, and when people say, everyone in the room will say that some relationship has been lost or diminished by the political partisanship, and it's hurting us all, and nobody wants that. So, on some level, being okay with having differences, holding that tension and being able to love someone that is different than you is actually a very beautiful thing.
Yes.
And that is, one of the reasons why I think when it comes to leadership for this, one of my dreams is that faith communities will step into this space and lead, because it is, it's the golden rule. And we need that help right now.
Given the era that we live in, where social media and other ways we have to connect ourselves, what I think would be an incredible challenge at a broader level is to figure out how to network all of this work and all of the people who are willing to be involved in it to actually form some national momentum that is different than the almost hysteria we see in the national media and in the TV and in some of the national political discussions we've suffered through this year.
So I like props. We use them at the Village Square all the time. And one of our props is a Staples Easy button. Have you all seen that? It's a little red button. And you press it and it says, "That was easy." So I would challenge everyone to throw out their easy buttons. I think that, technology, we live at a time when all sorts of things make life easier for us, and that's really wonderful. Easy is good for office supplies, but bad for democracy. And some of this, frankly, is just hard. And so do something that's different than what's normal for you. Stretch, reach. It always ends up really good. It turns out well when you do. It's a wonderful adventure, so just can your easy button.
Where do we start? Is it with us as individuals? Is it with us in our families? Is it with us in our neighborhoods or within our houses of worship, our places of work? Where do we take this good feeling? And we all agree, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But how do we do this? Where do we start? And it gives us a sense of purpose.
That's my favorite question. I'm an organizer, and living room conversations are specifically designed so that people can choose to have a living room conversation because it's just two friends with different viewpoints, each invite two friends for a structured conversation. So you can all decide to do this tomorrow. It's all up on the website, it's open source, and we're trying to learn from everybody in the process. So, you know, knock my socks off and send back all the stories about what happened. I really would like Utah to show everybody how to do this. I mean, I've had a great time here today because you've got, I think, a more cohesive community than many, many places.
Years ago, during one of those periods when this country was not well received abroad, a dear friend of ours traveled around the world, and she sat on a park bench with a sign said, "American willing to listen." And what I'm imagining now are park benches with signs saying, "Liberal, willing to listen," "Conservative, willing to listen," "Independent, willing to listen."
And I've had the privilege in this work of actually studying and writing about folks like John Huntsman, who's in my book, and of the folks here in Utah and my colleagues who are all in the book. I got the chance to study them and say, well, what's going on? And what I realize is that they love America in a certain way that I think is actually pretty important. And it's a love that's not red, and it's a love that's not blue. It's a love that's deeper than red and blue. And I'm sure many of you have that love in your heart. And I guess the question I'd leave with you today is, how do we express that love more purely so we can actually see it in each other, rather than it being hidden behind this fog of positions and colors and conventions and yeah, so that's my question. How do we manifest our love so that it comes through as love?